The air in the Zhang family meeting room was as stale as the traditions it upheld. Sunlight struggled through the heavy brocade curtains, illuminating dust motes dancing over the gleaming mahogany table, where the fate of Zhang Tongtong was being decided like a corporate merger. The Wang family's third son is a fool, but their port development projects are not, said the man known as Second Bro, his tone slick with pragmatism. He adjusted his cufflinks, a gesture of finality, marrying her off souls to problems. We get the deal, and we unload the girl. He spoke of his niece as if she were a line item on a balance sheet, his eyes cold and empty of anything resembling affection. Across the table, Zhang Shen, the family's notorious black sheep and Tong Tong's eldest uncle, slammed his palm flat on the wood. The sharp crack echoed in the suffocating silence. Unload her. Second Bro, are you even human? You're talking about selling a child. His voice was a low growl of disgust, his handsome face contorted with a mix of fury and disbelief. He was the family's wild child, but even he had a moral compass, and it was spinning violently. Before the argument could escalate, the heavy doors burst open. Zhang Tongtong stood framed in the doorway, a storm in human form. Her hair was a mess. Her simple dress was rumpled. Her eyes burned with a defiant fire that made the room's occupants flinch. She had been summoned to be judge, but she had arrived as the judge herself. She marched directly to the man she was supposed to call her father, the man who had sighed her and then abandoned her for nearly 2 decades. You believe them? She challenged, her voice trembling not with fear, but with rage. You believed the rumors they spread, and you side with them. After all these years, you bring me to this house only to throw me away again. Her father, a weak man dwarfed by the power of his brothers, couldn't meet her gaze. Second Bro scoffed. This is a family decision. You will do as you're told. Tong Tong's chin lifted. I don't agree. The words were simple, but they landed like a declaration of war. They were an assertion of self in a room designed to extinguish it. Her mother tried to hiss her into submission, but Tong Tong stood her ground, a lone island against a tide of familial tyranny. At the head of the table, Grandpa Zhang, the family patriarch who had remained silent until now, leaned forward. An appreciative spark ignited in his shrewd eyes. He saw past the disheveled girl and recognized the unbending will of his youth, a spirit he thought had long been bred out of his descendants. In her defiance, he saw a reflection of the fire that had built his empire. Sensing a shift in power, Tong Tong turned her attention to the old man. Her voice, though still firm, softened with a sliver of vulnerability. Grandpa, since they do not want me as their daughter, I ask you to choose a new father for me. The request was audacious, a public disowning of the 2 people who had given her life, only to fill it with neglect. Second Bro shot to his feet, his face purple with rage. Insolent girl, if you reject this family, you can go back to the countryside and starve. Enough, Grandpa's voice boomed, silencing his son instantly. His gaze settled on Tong Tong, his expression uncharacteristically gentle. Child, you were missing for 18 years. They failed to find you, and now that you are back, they treat you like this. You sigh, a sound heavy with regret. It is we who have wronged you. Come, stay with me in the main house. I will ensure no one harms you. It was a lifeline, an offer of ultimate protection. Anyone else would have seized it, but Tong Tong, with a wisdom far beyond her years, gave a slight bow of her head. The air in Zhang Tongtong's temporary room was thick with Zhang Shen's frantic energy. He paced before her, a caged tiger desperate to soothe its new, fragile cub. She sat on the edge of the bed, her shoulders slumped, the picture of melancholy he'd found her in. What is it? He pleaded, his voice cracking with unpracticed concern. Just tell me what's wrong. I'll fix it. I'll buy you anything. Tong Tong lifted her head, her eyes wide and disarmingly clear. Father, she began, her voice soft, are your cars, your bars, And your mahjong more important than spending time with me? Zhang Shan froze, the question landing like a physical blow. What? No, of course not. He sputtered, his bravado crumbling into flustered denial. Tong Tong, you're what matters most to me now. Nothing else compares. Her expression remained doubtful, a masterpiece of subtle heartbreak. But earlier, I wanted to see your new sports car. The silver one. The bodyguard stopped me, he said. Mr. Chang told him it was his treasure and no one was allowed to touch it. She looked down at her hands. I just thought a car is his treasure. What am I? Guilt, sharp and unfamiliar, ripped through Zhang Shen. He saw not a strategic jab, but the genuine hurt of a neglected child. His playboy logic had only one solution. Grand, impulsive and utterly insane gestures. He whipped out his phone, his thumb flying across the screen. Mrs. Lee. He barked into the receiver, his voice echoing in the quiet room. Find a beer. Sell all of them. Yes, all of my limited edition cars. I don't care about the price. Liquidate them by tomorrow. He hung up, breathing heavily as if he'd just run a marathon, and turned to her with a triumphant, pleading look. See, they're just metal. Con. Tong Tong's eyes welled with manufactured tears, but a calculating glint lay deep within. She pointed a delicate finger toward the window, in the direction of the back garden's private enclosure. And little cutie, she whispered, referring to his prized pet. A 7-foot-long Siamese crocodile he doted on like a child. Am I not as cute as your little cutie? Zhang Shen's face went pale. Little cutie was his pride, a symbol of his rebellious eccentricity. But faced with Tong Tong's glistening eyes, the reptile didn't stand a chance. He snatched up the phone again. Mrs. Lee, get the chef. Tell him to prepare a stew. A very special stew. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. The main ingredient is in the back garden. Under the relentless pressure of her innocent gaze, the purge continued. His fully stocked personal bar. Sell the liquor. Give the bar away. His antique, hand-carved mahjong table. Chop it up for firewood. By the time she finally offered him a watery, grateful smile, Zhang Shen had systematically dismantled his entire identity as the family's resident hedonist. He felt strangely hollow, yet filled with an intoxicating sense of purpose. An hour later, he proudly placed a steaming bowl of thick, white stew before her at his dining table. The aroma was rich, almost gamey. I had this made just for you, he announced, beaming. To build up your strength. It's full of protein. Tong Tong stared at the soup, a flicker of genuine horror quickly masked by gratitude. She picked up the spoon, her hand steady. This was the cost of war. She took a small, careful sip. It was surprisingly tender. It's delicious, father, she said, a voice imbued with a quiet reverence that made his chest swell with pride. The week leading up to Grandpa Zhang's 70th birthday was a crucible. Days were spent with Tong Tong relentlessly molding Zhang Shen into the semblance of a dignified heir. She stood before him, a slender rod tapping his spine. Posture, big bro. A mountain doesn't slouch, Zhang Shen groaned, his back aching from hours of forced stillness. This is torture. Are you sure a straight back is worth more than the Lark Hill estate? It's not just about the estate, she said, her voice soft but unyielding. It's about showing them you are more than they believe you to be. Meanwhile, in Second Bro's opulent residence, a different kind of preparation was underway. He watched his daughter, Rory, practice at the grand piano, a flicker of regret in his eyes. That girl Tong Tong, she's turned him into a real threat. I shouldn't have let her go so easily. His wife scoffed. She's a nobody. Our Rory has the incomplete score of Princess Zhang Li's melody, Beyond the Clouds, a priceless treasure. When she performs tonight, Grandpa will see who the true heir of the family's legacy is. Rue's fingers danced across the keys, a confident, predatory smile on her face. Jiang Shun and his little pet won't know what hit them. On the night of the gala, the transformation was complete. Tong Tong circled Jiang Shun, her critical gaze sweeping over him. He stood in a bespoke charcoal suit, the sharp lines accentuating his height and broad shoulders. The wild, untamed hair was now styled into a sophisticated sweep, revealing the strong jaw and piercing eyes his playboy persona had always obscured. He was no longer a rebellious rogue. He was a magnate, a man of power. Well, he asked, a hint of his old smirk playing on his lips. Tong Tong mused, tapping her chin, almost perfect, just a tiny bit off. She reached up and straightened his silk tie, her fingers brushing his collarbone. For a moment, their eyes met, an unspoken current passing between them before she stepped back with a mischievous smile. There. Now. Already, their entrance into the grand ballroom sent a palpable shockwave through the assembled elite. Guests who had come prepared to mop the family's black sheep were left speechless. Jiang Shun moved with a newfound grace and authority, Tong Tong a picture of quiet elegance by his side. Second bro's jaw tightened, the wine glass in his hand threatening to shatter. His daughter, Rory, looked as if she had swallowed a lemon. Their plan to use Jiang Shun's slovenliness as a foil for their own perfection had just evaporated. Grandpa Jiang's booming laugh cut through the stunned silence. He clapped Jiang Shun on the shoulder, his eyes gleaming with pride. "Well done, my boy, well done." He then turned to Tong Tong. "You have worked a miracle, as promised. The deeds to the Lark Hill estate are yours." Later, after the toasts, Rory took to the stage. She announced her gift with great fanfare. The legendary Lost Melody Beyond the Clouds. The performance was technically proficient, but as Tong Tong listened, she recognized the awkward transitions and the hollow spaces. "It's like a beautiful vase with a crack running through it." The music stopped abruptly, hanging unfinished in the air. As polite applause rippled through the room, Tong Tong's clear voice rose. "A wonderful attempt. For my gift, I would like to offer Grandpa the complete Cloud Song melody." A wave of murmurs swept the hall. Second bro burst into derisive laughter. "You, a country bumpkin, knows a melody lost for a century. If you can play the whole thing, I'll eat 3 pounds of crap standing on my head." Undeterred, Tong Tong walked to the ancient gu keen on display. She sat, her fingers hovering over the strings. The first note she played was like a drop of water in a silent pool, pure and resonant. The melody that followed was a living thing. It flowed like a celestial river, soared like a crane, and wept like a forgotten memory. As she played, a gasp went through the front rows. The surface of the water in Grandpa's teacup began to tremble, forming perfect, concentric ripples, the physical manifestation of the melody, just as the ancient legends described. When the final note faded, the silence was profound. Grandmother's son, the nation's most revered Gukin expert, rose to his feet, his eyes filled with tears of awe. That was it. The genuine, complete melody beyond the clouds. Unbelievable. Grandpa Jiang, his voice thick with emotion, looked at Tong Tong with immeasurable pride. "The blood of our ancestors runs true and strong in this child." His gaze swept pointedly over second bro's pale, horrified face. But the moment of triumph was violently shattered. The ballroom doors burst open and a disheveled woman stormed in, cameras flashing in her wake. She pointed a trembling finger at Jiang Shun. You monster, you promised me everything, and now our baby is gone." She collapsed in a heap, sobbing hysterically. Chaos erupted. Grandpa's face turned to thunder. Jiang Shun's past reputation was a weapon his enemies now wielded with brutal efficiency. "Jiang Shun," he roared, his voice cracking with fury and disappointment, "to the ancestral hall. Kneel and reflect on what you've done." As guards began to escort a stunned and silent Jiang Shun away, second bro stepped forward, his voice dripping with false sympathy for the cameras. What a tragedy. It seems my nephew will never change. He's ruined. The Zhang family name is ruined, is it? Tong Tong's voice, though quiet, cut through the nose like a shard of ice. She stood fearlessly amidst the storm. She looked not at the crying woman, but directly at second bro, uncle. You seemed so certain of big bro's guilt. It's almost as if you knew this would happen, and it's quite a coincidence that you were spotted at St. Mary's Hospital this afternoon, right where the media just happened to be waiting. Second bro's smug expression faltered. Tong Tong continued, her gaze cold and sharp. You see, when this woman was admitted for her miscarriage, I anticipated there might be some confusion, so I had a doctor I trust arrange for a fetal tissue sample to be collected. She held up her phone, the screen glowing. The DNA results are being expedited. We'll know who the real father is in 1 hour. The air in the Zhang ancestral hall was thick and suffocating, heavy with the scent of aged sandalwood and unspoken accusations. Tong Tong stood beside Zhang Shen, a presence of small, steady flame in the cavernous, shadow-filled room. Before them, rows of memorial tablets stared down like a silent jury. Zhang Shen's hands were clenched into fists at his sides, his usual carefree mask stripped away, leaving only raw vulnerability. He leaned in, his voice a strained whisper only she could hear. Why are you still here? If it's true, your reputation will be ruined along with mine. Tong Tong met his gaze, her own clear and unwavering. Because it isn't true, she said, her voice soft but absolute. I believe you, Dad. The word dad still felt strange on her tongue, a role they had stumbled into. But it held a power that anchored him. A tremor went through him, a flicker of disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. In his entire life, through every scandal and screw-up, real or fabricated, no one had ever offered him such an unconditional faith. She was the first, the only one. He felt a lump form in his throat, a foreign sensation for a man who met the world with a smirk. Just then, the heavy doors creaked open. Grandpa's aide, old Chen, walked in, his face an impassive slate. He held a sealed manila envelope. The room's tension tightened like a knot. Chang Shen, the second brother, watched from the side, a smug, predatory stillness about him. He was sure he had finally cornered the wild dog of the family. Old Chen handed the envelope to the patriarch. Grandpa's hands, though wrinkled with age, were steady as he tore it open. The rustle of paper was deafening in the silence. He scanned the document, his expression unreadable, before lifting his gaze. His eyes, sharp and discerning, bypassed a pale-faced Zhang Shen and landed squarely on his second son. The look was glacial. The DNA does not match, Grandpa announced, his voice echoing with cold authority. Zhang Shen is not the father. A collective, muted gasp rippled through the assembled family members. Zhang Shen swayed slightly, the relief so immense it almost buckled his knees. Tong Tong instinctively reached out, her hand finding his arm, steadying him. He looked down at her, his eyes shimmering with vindication and something deeper recognition of her loyalty. Zhang Shen's smirk dissolved. Father, there must be a mistake. That woman. Silence, Grandpa snapped. He folded the paper with deliberate, menacing precision. His regret for doubting Zhang Shen was a sharp, bitter taste, but it was quickly overshadowed by a burning fury at being manipulated. Old Chen, he commanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. Find that woman. Find out who paid her, who coached her, and who provided her with my son's schedule. I want the puppet and the puppet master. His gaze remained locked on Zhang Shen, leaving no doubt as to who he considered the prime suspect. Later that evening, the mansion's tension had receded into a low simmering resentment. Zhang Shen, a glass of whiskey in hand, stared out at the city lights from his balcony. The victory felt hollow, a familiar ache settling in his chest. Tong Tong approached quietly, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. This wasn't the first time, was it? She asked gently. He didn't turn. What makes you say that? Zhang Shen's confidence, she said. He's done this before. A bitter laugh escaped him. He finally turned, his eyes dark with memory. 9 years ago, a scholarship student at the university. He planted evidence, fabricated love letters, paid her to accuse me of forcing her into a relationship to ruin her reputation. I was suspended. Grandpa sent me abroad for 2 years. Everyone believed it. They always believed the worst of me. He took a long swallow of his drink. I never told anyone the truth. Who would have listened? I'm listening now, Tong Tong said, her voice a balm on the old wound. In that moment, he wasn't a playboy heir or her fake father. He was just a man who had been betrayed one too many times. He finally confided in her, the carefully constructed walls around his heart crumbling under the weight of her quiet empathy. The next morning, Grandpa summoned Tong Tong to his study. The room smelled of old books and power. He was seated behind a vast mahogany desk, but his expression was warmer than she had ever seen it. Tong Tong, he began, his voice filled with a pride that startled her. The National Music Archives called me personally. They said your transcription of Melody, Beyond the Clouds, is a national treasure. You have not only honored our family, you have made a significant contribution to our country's cultural heritage. He gestured for her to sit. Your wisdom, your talent, and your loyalty, you have proven yourself to be a true member of the Zhang family. He slid a portfolio across the desk. For your invaluable contribution, and for standing by Zhang Shen, and I failed too. I'm transferring 10% of the Zhong Group's shares into your name. Tong Tong's breath hitched. 10%. It was an astronomical, life-altering fortune. It wasn't just money. It was power. A shield. A weapon. She was no longer a pawn. She was a player. Grandpa, she stammered, overwhelmed. You've earned it, he said simply. Family protects its own. When she left the study, Zhang Shen was waiting. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face as she showed him the documents. His own position, long neglected, was suddenly bolstered by her newfound influence. He saw Zhang Shen stalking down the hallway, his face a mask of thunderous rage. Oh, second brood, Zhang Shen called out, his old swagger returning. But this time it was backed by real power. I believe we had a bet. You said if I was innocent, you'd eat 3 pounds of crap. Should I have the kitchen prepare that for you? Zhang Shen's face went from pale to purple. He shot a look of pure venom at Tong Tong before storming away. Defeated and humiliated, he finally understood. The country bumpkin he'd dismissed was a strategic genius. And his feckless older brother was no longer a joke. He was a contender. That night, Zhang Shen found Tong Tong in the garden. He looked different, taller, more centered. The wild child was gone, replaced by a man with purpose. From now on, he said, his voice serious, you don't have to face anything alone. Any problem, any person who bothers you, you tell your dad, I'll fix it. A profound sense of security washed over her. It wasn't romance, but it was love. It was protection. It was the family she had chosen, and had been chosen by. Her Cinderella story wasn't about a prince. It was about finding a king and helping him reclaim his kingdom. Silently, she vowed to do just that. His reputation as a useless playboy was no longer a weakness. In her hands, it would become their greatest weapon. From the windows above, the rest of the family watched them, their faces contorted with seething resentment. They had made a grave miscalculation. Zhang Tong Tong was not just a girl who had stumbled into their world. She was the architect of its new order. With her by my side, Zhang Shen murmured, more to himself than to her, I'll never let them win again.